Hello, welcome to Lock-In with Lachlan. My name is Lachlan, and here's the guest today, Mr. Kasselman from Glasshouse Christian College, senior head, if I'm saying.
Oh, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Let's start with the first question. All right. How important is being a father in today's society?
I actually think there's a massive lack of fathers today. Because we as societies, I think humans for thousands and thousands of years, we used to live in communities where you would have your father as the head of a household.
Yep.
And that father brought the stability to the family. And then you'd have other men around you in the village who would be part of that community. I think what's happened with our radical individualism today is that we are living these separate lives and we are no longer as integrated as what we used to be. So I think we've got a shortage of fathers. And a really interesting information out of the US, and especially the research was done in the inner cities in the US, where in the 1950s, most kids in the inner cities in the US had a dad at home. Then they tried a radical program where they wanted to really help poor single mums. So they incentivized poor single mums getting a special allowance from the government so that they can be looked after so that kids don't grow up in poverty. But what they didn't realize is that many of these girls went, if I want this money, I need to not have a father in the house. And that's led to massive fatherlessness. And what's happened because of that is young men who don't have a man in the house to show them how it's done, and also not a positive role model. And young men just gravitate to power and gravitate towards some kind of purpose. And what has happened in the inner cities in the US is all those young men gravitated to the gangs because those gangs gave them the environment in which they could actually have a leader, be masculine within that framework. And that's led to massive problems in the US. And all of that because of fatherlessness. So I think massive for us today, because there are large proportions of society that are growing up without positive men in their lives.
Yeah. So you're a father yourself, aren't
Yes,
you?
I am.
Yeah. How many kids?
Yeah, so I've got two kids. I've got an older daughter who's at university, and I've got a son in year 9.
You know, was being a father was very stressful, yeah.
Do you know what? So what my wife and I try to do is to create the safe environment for kids to grow up in. So my wife is absolutely amazing. And even before our kids were born, she would go and track what the development of the baby is, and she would eat the foods to actually benefit the baby's intelligence, right, and the baby's development. So before they were there, we were already trying to do the best for them. So, and as a man, it's very different to becoming a father to being a mother. I mean, as a mother, the baby grows within inside you, you give birth to the baby, you become the first source of food for the baby. And for the first 6 weeks of a baby's life, they don't even know that the mum isn't part of their body. They just assume it. I cry, I get food. I'm cold, I cry, I get warmth. The first person whose love needs to be won is the dad. And I remember my daughter when she was born, because my wife's so small, when my daughter was born, she was born with her nose totally deformed. And when her one leg was sitting like this up against the shin. And we thought, oh my goodness, what's happened to our baby? Not realizing that those bones are pretty flexible when they're born. And I remember looking at her, and she was all deformed as she lay there. And I made a decision right there. I said, I will be your dad, and I am going to love you as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And And I think for men, many times, because you don't carry the baby, it's that choice of love, that choice of connection to that kid, and it's something that grows. So kids always want to win their dad's affection, and sometimes if the dad doesn't respond, eventually they give up. And it is actually key for boys and girls to have a dad, because they did lots of tests. If you're close to a dad, you actually have better vocabulary than kids who don't. If your dad reads books to you, you are more engaged in education than kids who don't. So, and that doesn't mean that if you don't have a dad, that or it's all gone to pot and it won't work for you. It just gives, if you've got two people trying to do the best for a kid, it just gives them such an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually stats from the Australian government website said that like 44% of marriages are divorced.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the main cause of divorce?
Well, I think living with someone else towards the same goals is difficult, because you've got all these different elements. You've got personality, you've got stresses, because having little kids, it's very stressful. So there are some danger times when someone just gets married. To adjust to living with someone, that's a stressful time, and many people cop out and they go, I can't do this. When you've got little kids, there's lots of stress on you, because they are hard to raise, and that's a dangerous time for a relationship. The other dangerous time is around my age, where you've got grown kids, and those grown kids no longer need you as much, and then you reflect on the fact that you're not really engaged with each other anymore, and some people give up at that point. So they are the main danger points. And I think with our individualistic society today, we ask ourselves, am I being satisfied through this relationship? Yeah. And for a lot of people, if they say, I'm no longer being satisfied, they give up on the relationship, and they don't work as hard as they used to. What happened in the olden days was the whole community would come alongside you, your parents would get engaged, and they would try and help you save the marriage. Mm. We no longer have that at all. Now, I must give a disclaimer. If there are violent relationships or destructive relationships, it's very important for the person to tap out. But for most people, they actually, when they're older, regret giving up on a relationship just because it wasn't as satisfying. Because the way humans are wired is to not necessarily see everything that's good. You only see what's a problem. So what you do is, some things are wrong in your household and you're looking for the problem, and the problem is obviously your spouse or your crazy kids, and then you want to tap out because that's happened. And I think that's part of what's happened. And then later people reflect and say, oh, if only I had held on, it might have been very different when the stress is lifted again. But I think that's one of the things that's happened. Another thing is it's become easier to get divorced. Legally, no-fault divorces actually allow you to divorce for any reason. And previously they made it much harder because they believed that the family is actually the base of society. Yeah. So I think those are some of the reasons you have it today. I think a better question today is, why would you stay together? And that's a hard one to answer for some people.
Hmm. Last week I did an interview with Mr. Pina. Mm-hmm. I asked him this question, and it's, is masculinity decreasing over the years? And he said, obvious, like, I see, like men in World War One, they were like faking their ages to be 18 because they have this fiery action to fight for their country. Do you think that's decreasing over the years?
I think masculinity has shifted. So if you think about, let's go back to Viking times.
Yeah.
If you are the man, you've got to swing that axe and you've got to chop the wood. Someone comes towards your house with evil intent, you've got to fight them off. You've got to kill the wolves. You've got to kill the bears. You've got to protect your family. You've got to cut down those trees and build your log cabin. Very defined masculine roles. What's happened since the Second World War is actually because all the men were fighting, lots of women were drawn into the factories. And because of machinery, women were able to do the jobs that men used to do. So lots of these men came back and the women did their jobs. Because of the machinery that have been invented, the real old-fashioned masculine skills weren't needed anymore. So men had to adapt to a new environment. And I think that is quite interesting to see how men have dealt with it. Because if you look around, suddenly having a massive beard is very fashionable. It's something that only men do, grow a massive beard. Some guys act really, really masculine. He's got his four-wheel drive and he's got big spotlights on it and massive wheels to reclaim some of that masculinity, because we don't have any real enemies to fight. There are no wolves and bears to fight off. Hostile people aren't coming to your house anymore. So what's happened is, I think society has changed and the needs of society have changed. So where they are at present is in a very difficult situation where men now have to try and navigate it. So there are two major movements I see at present, and this is just from my perspective. The one is I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I'm going to be a Sigma male, and I'm going to drive my Bugatti and have all the ladies and live in a castle, and I don't care what anybody thinks or who I offend. That's the one route, and it's a little bit thuggish, so many young men want to go that way. The other way that young men are going is saying, hold on, I'm going to be a very positive male. I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to be very vocal. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be independent. I'm going to be a great father. Women will feel safe with me, and I am going to look after myself and look after everybody. I'm going to be a positive force in the universe. And I think those are the two emerging. Then you've got a third group of people who've gone, I've met evil men, so I hate men myself. And I don't want to be like them at all, so I want to be something totally different. And those are the three movements I see at present. So who I hope will win are the sophisticated men who go, yeah, maybe I've not had a great childhood, but I will be that great dad. I will make myself a sophisticated, intelligent, skilled man and make the world a better place. And I hope that's the team that's going to win.
Yeah. Let me expand on the point you made about the Sigma males, the alpha males. Do you think that's a negative impact on men today, or that's a positive?
Look, those terms actually don't really accurately describe human civilizations. If you were really describing wolves in a wolf pack, oh yes, there definitely is an alpha male in there. Sigma male, I think, is pretty much an invention of the guy who isn't an alpha and popular, but still feels himself popular. But I think human societies work quite differently. So if you think about human societies, we want to select someone who is strong enough to protect and to guide, but we also want someone who is kind enough to look after other people. Because you can imagine, just for yourself, if someone is just in the game for themselves, eventually we start resenting them, going, oh, you're not with me. So in society, we make this deal with someone who becomes a dominant person. Our deal is, I will give you lots of privileges, but then you must look after me. And I think that is the type of male we need. Because in human societies, we don't have an alpha male. We have several males, and if they are just aggressive, like your Sigmas are, that is not a pro-social person. So what eventually happens is, the males and the females start rejecting this person because they're not pro-social. If you're strong enough to hold on to power and strong enough to look after the people in your care, then people will give you their loyalty. And I think that's where we are. So I don't think we really have alphas, and we refer to it as such. But I think we've got some males who rise up, but if they can care for their people, the people will give them the power they need. But you also have some males that just grab it and use it for their own benefits, and I think they are the ones that are actually a problem in society. That's just my take on it.
No. So let's jump into another topic. All right. You're a Christian, aren't
Yes,
you?
I am.
Yeah. How has being a Christian changed your life? When did you meet him, and when did you meet Jesus, and how did he change your life?
So, for me, there are certain phases of my life. Grew up in a Christian home, but since I was little, I was quite intellectual about things and had lots of strange questions about the world. And growing up in a small rural town in Africa, many of those questions I had, there was no one to answer them. So I'd walk around with all these questions, and I remember as a 10-year-old going to church, and the pastor in the church invited people to the front who wanted to become a Christian. Man, and I decided, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And I was probably around 8 at that time. Went to the front, and I said to my parents, I want to get baptized. And they said, oh, no, we don't think as an 8-year-old you can be baptized. And I begged them and I begged them and I begged them until I was about 10. And eventually they and the pastor relented and said, okay, if you really want it, we'll let you get baptized. And I remember the day I was baptized as a 10-year-old, I understood really what it meant. It meant give your life to God. Now, there's a story I told you guys in class a while ago where I, as a 2-year-old, actually had meningitis and almost died. And the fact that I survived, whereas all the prognosis said, you are not going to live, right? They told my parents, ready yourself. Because I was given life, I decided I need to live my life in a way that it benefits. I'm not supposed to be alive, so I need to make sure my life benefits humanity. Everywhere I go, I need to bring light and life and hope. So all these things working together, I was a Christian, very shy about it as a teenager because it's a bit nerdy. And then I got to university and I started studying a lot of philosophy, and I thought, what if I'm just completely wrong? What if I have just been conditioned by my society to believe this and believe it to be true and generated all these feelings and emotions and about it? So at university, I ended up starting to read all the religions that I could get my hand on. And it took me about 3 months of a massive personal crisis in my first year at university to go through it all. And I started reading lots of books about people who've had the same questions. After about 3 months, I realized there's no real intellectual answer. Unless Jesus is who he said he was, that would not be able to, and unless you could trust that he was who he said he was, you would not be able to hang your hat on Christianity. And I prayed and prayed and prayed, and now this is the hard bit for lots of people because it's a very subjective experience. It feels like revelation, where sometimes you sit and something just clicks for you and you go, oh, yeah, that's it. I had this moment of revelation where I went, yeah, Jesus, you're real. What you claimed is true, and I will devote my life to you. And that was a big move for me. And I remember my girlfriend then, my wife now, we were sitting at a big meeting, and there was a Canadian evangelist talking, and who was a missionary. And he said, who of you would want to give at least 1 or 2 years of your life to be a missionary? And while I sat there, suddenly my girlfriend jumps up. And I thought, what are you doing that for? I'm going to get married to you. So I stood up as well. And what's happened is, I've not given 2 years, I've given the rest of my life to that. Almost like a missionary, working as a teacher, and the teacher gave me the opportunity. I wanted to be a psychologist. And with that revelation, I kind of changed my direction and decided I'm not going to be a psychologist, I'm going to be a teacher, because that puts me in a situation where I can actually share good news with people. But what I found really repulsive as I grew up was when people kind of force religion, give you a all or nothing choice. I thought that's not really a fair way to do it. The way I'm going to approach it is give people the best information, because I think people want to make an honest, informed decision. So that's why I teach people about all kinds of different religions and hope to bring them to the point that I reached, where they have that revelation of who Jesus is and he can open their eyes. And that's something I can't do. And I refuse to do it through manipulative language. I need the Holy Spirit to actually show someone what the truth is.
There's a question you asked me in religion. You question everyone. Is that if you put like a group of people who never had any information from any place, you put them in the middle of a forest, and you ask, would they make a religion or not?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think humans have this urge to find out the meaning of their lives?
Yeah, so I actually believe that's programmed in us. Because man, you can go to the deepest Amazon jungle or in Central Africa with people who've never contacted anybody and religions there. And even people who claim no religion, they have to replace it with someone. Even if you look at the USSR, they had to create the cult of the leader, like in North Korea, with the Kim family. They've got to have somebody. Even during the French Revolution, when they got rid of religion, they started the cult of reason. Humans need religion because otherwise our lives become purposeless. And that sense of something is in us. I believe it's programmed in us so that we will seek to find the Creator. And the Native Americans, Native Africans, Native Australians, all of them have that in them. And I believe that is one of the deepest parts of who we are. Now, as rational Western people during the Enlightenment, which was a wonderful thing, because we called out a lot of rubbish that people believed. The Enlightenment was really important, and I think a lot of Enlightenment principles are still very important. But one of the things they did, and René Descartes, who I love, the philosopher, he kind of said, we're a human machine. And that idea that God can be excluded because we're just a machine, and that scientific thinking, of which all the originators were Christians, like Isaac Newton and René Descartes and Galileo and all these guys, that scientific thinking in the Enlightenment kind of got rid of religion, and they said, we are just a human machine. But that's left an emptiness and led to us living these quiet lives of desperation, as they say. So I think that is so deeply in us, and if we never engage that, you get to that point where the rich and famous people that all of us look up to today, they start using drugs to fill that gap. And I think it's in us because we need to reach out to the Creator. There's a part of us that says that's where meaning and purpose is found. And unless we can do that, you are not really reaching it. If you look at just some celebrities, Jim Carrey and someone like Russell Brand, they've gone to the top of their careers, and then eventually you've made all the money, you've had the girlfriends, you've had the fame, and you still feel empty. And what they do is they all turn to faith. Justin Bieber, the whole lot of them, because that is where it's really at. And I think that's a big driver for people.
So you were raised in South Africa, right?
Yes.
I was talking to a guy yesterday. He was like he used to be a student here. He said that you gave like a really good story about a physical experience you had with God, like in Africa, and you saw like did you see exorcism?
Yeah, I did.
Africa.
So this actually happened in the country of Zambia.
Yeah.
And that was a life changer for me because I was a student of psychology. And what I thought they were talking about in the Bible was with exorcisms and someone having a demon. I thought, that's just ancient people not understanding mental illness. And that's just how they explained it. So this is what I really believed. That's how I made sense of it. And I went on this missionary journey into Zambia. And man, that was so confronting what I saw there. And it's very hard for lots of people coming from Western perspective to understand that if you talk to any indigenous or native people, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And what I saw there was seeing the exorcism happen there. I was not a part of it at all. And the conditions in which it happened, that actually strengthened my faith. Because I sat there and I think I looked into the face of evil. It was very real and you could feel it in that place. But seeing people free from that thing that held them really radically transformed me. I've not seen much of it since, but that was the moment that I realized this spiritual world is something very real.
So do you believe that demons are real?
Yes, but I don't think they are what we think they are. Right? So, and this is now personal opinion, based in some scripture. I think we live with a multi-dimensional world, because we live in 3 dimensions. We can't really imagine what it must be like being in a 4th or 5th or 6th dimension. So I think they're multi-dimensional beings that interact with our world, and some of them are hostile. And we describe them as demons, but I believe they're just spiritual creatures from a different dimension that interact with us. And because they are multidimensional, we can't necessarily see them or perceive them, but they have very real influence on us.
Let me ask you something else. Do you think there's life on other planets, and will that contradict the Bible?
You see, that I don't get where some people say if you find aliens on Mars, that contradicts the Bible. Because for me, God created this tremendous universe, and He could put whatever He wanted wherever He wanted. You know, I would not be surprised if we find life elsewhere. It does not disprove in any way for me any of what is claimed in the Bible. What's interesting is if you look into all kinds of different theories about life and spirituality, you see that some people, for some or other reason, think if you find life on another planet, that disproves the Bible. The Bible nowhere claims that there is no life, because the Bible is written for people on earth, living a life on earth, and living physical but also spiritual lives. And that's why I would be absolutely delighted if we find something on another planet, and they will either be more advanced than us or less advanced than us.
So with do you think so you're a psychologist. You're a psychology
well,
teacher.
I was a psychology major,
Yeah.
but not a psychologist. I just know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. So what's the difference between the moral good and bad?
Wow, that's a massive philosophical question.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a massive philosophical question. And you see, goodness and badness, now, for a lot of people, especially if you're a postmodernist, you would say there is no such thing as good and evil. These are just constructs that we've come up with. But there are certain actions in history that we can refer to, or even things that happen, that if you don't believe there's good and evil, you could just look at it and say, oh, that's an interesting expression of what you're doing. Like Jeffrey Dahmer and the people he killed and massacred, and the way that he disposed of their bodies. It is evil. But if you are a postmodernist, you go, oh, well, That was just his thing and his reality.
Hmm.
If you look at what the Nazis did, it's evil. If you look at what they did in the gulags in the USSR, it's absolutely evil. And what I think the measure is for good and evil is not necessarily intention, but outcome. Intention has something to do with, because sometimes we do something with the best of intention, but it has a horrific outcome. Like what they used to do is spray DDT to get rid of bugs, but then poisoned our waterways, and it became something really evil. It was done with the best of intention, but became something really horrible. Now, evil is something that damages other people, right? Damages the world. It is something, and especially if it's done out of selfish motive, like what the Nazis did, what Jeffrey Dahmer did. Those things are almost a palpable evil, and they're almost a spiritual evil. And it is very hard to explain to people. I've been in places where you can almost feel it physically. Your skin crawls, and you know there is a presence here that makes you go, no, this is evil. So there is even evil action, and I believe that a lot of that is precipitated by spiritual evil that backs that up. And sometimes evil is perpetrated with the best of intentions, like the eugenics movements. They said, oh, we're just trying to purify humanity and get rid of people who are lesser people, and led to massacres of people just because of that belief, which I think is profoundly evil. So I'm very much a Christian humanist. I believe that we should look after humans because that's God's priority as well. And the Christian humanists were also the ones that triggered the Renaissance. So that is what I would like to, if we believe evil exists, we can prevent it. If we believe it doesn't exist, then we can perpetrate it with the best of intentions.
So, have you ever heard the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about Friedrich Nietzsche?
So I think in his book Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he has a quote, and I might quote it incorrectly, but I think he says, "We have killed God, and there's not enough water to wash away the blood." It's actually him saying, because we killed God, we have to fill it with something else. Now, it's pretty dark where this went. So he said what we need to do because we've killed God, and he was actually a bit sad about it, that we had done that. He says, what we now have to do is we have to become God by becoming the Ubermensch, like the superhuman. And of course, the people who grabbed that idea and ran with it were the Nazis.
Oh, yeah.
That's where their whole concept of Ubermensch came from. So, and Nietzsche is very much perceived as someone who is very sad about the world, but wants to reshape it and take command of evolution. So for him as a philosopher, he had some brilliant ideas. Like if you read his quotes, it just absolutely resonates because he was so honest with himself. And I think there's a lot that we can take from that. But just like everything, like a knife, it's wonderful if you're cutting a carrot. It does a great job, but that same knife can be used to stab someone with. So Nietzsche's got his own ideas, and you could actually use those ideas like the Nazis and create what they had, their Ubermensch idea, or you could use those ideas as a part of self-reflection to go, yep, these are some of the realities we're dealing with, and we can actually deal with these problems in society in a healthy way, because he was a very clear thinking philosopher. So it's very much, his ideas could be very dangerous or be very beneficial as well.
the Ubermensch. Do you think humans can have an Ubermensch?
So look, the Nazis actually, I don't know if you know about the Lebensborn.
No.
So the Nazis actually did this experiment. They got some of their SS soldiers, and they got beautiful, tall, strong, healthy, intelligent blonde girls, and they bred them in a breeding program. All these babies were meant to be the super race that they were raising, the Ubermensch. And what happened is, after the Nazis fell, those poor kids were abused and rejected, and all of them dumped into orphanages. So we never know what really happened to them. There are some indication that some of them actually became top pop stars. We don't know where they went, but there was really that experiment. Now, I think the other thing that's happening is, with the rise of technology, they're trying to upgrade us technologically to the extent that they want to upload us to a computer so that we could live eternally and put us in a humanoid robot. I know that some of the tech companies, that's actually their dream, to make us live eternally inside this robot by uploading us. But that's the assumption that all we are these things that are going on in our brain. If we truly have a spirit and a soul, you will just upload some of the electrical signals in the brain. Not really us. We will die, because once we get uploaded to that computer and they think it's an upgrade, we actually cease to exist. And then we're actually in the Matrix, or even worse, we are in Terminator. Because we are no longer what we used to be, that human thing that is not just mechanical. So upgrades, I think we can upgrade ourselves. We are getting taller, we're better educated, we live much longer, so we've been upgraded. I don't know whether genetically we're getting any better, but I think it's possible to upgrade humans. They've done lots of experiments. I know there are illegal experiments about genetic modification in humans. You can actually pay for the type of kid you want. Some people will mess with your genetics a bit and get some basketball baller DNA and some supermodel DNA and mix that together and get really tall, strong, beautiful kids. But I think they can try these upgrades, but sometimes done with the best of intentions, and you get some side effects that you're not necessarily ready for.
Do you think AI will take over humanity one day?
Depends on how we program it.
Yeah.
At present, what does bother me a little bit is that the creators of AI are scared. That the people who funded AI development are scared. I think definitely it's going to radically transform our world. Think email is going to be radically transformed. Video is going to be radically transformed. Lots of jobs are going to disappear. I don't know whether we're going to have a useless class like many people are saying, because that just creates other opportunities. So just like when we went through the Industrial Revolution, a whole bunch of people no longer had jobs, but then they were put into other jobs that really boomed the economy from there. I think we will go through a painful transition where some people will be useless for the current jobs, but they will be put in another place where they can do something very useful. Like you could have people who are no longer employed reforest all our clear-cut areas, and we could have people plant millions and millions and millions of trees because the AI is doing the job they used to do. And now this is something that humans can do, or care for things. And humans will start doing the roles that robots struggle with, like caring, building a relationship, being very creative. So I don't think it's going to completely take over the world unless, and there have been several movies that have been made about AI going rogue and trying to wipe out humans and things like that. I hope that we'll have that someone will be wise enough to regulate it, so we've always got a red button to unplug it. if that is necessary. But at present, I'm pretty excited about what it's going to do. And especially, I'm excited about what it's doing for individualized education. As an educator, I'm very excited because I think kids will get better education because they'll be tracked much better and the program can be worked out to educate them to the best of their ability.
Let's talk about something else. This is gonna be the last question
Yes.
of the podcast because you're busy. All right. What do you think about the Book of Revelations, where it talks about the rapture and the end times?
Yeah. I'm sure you had a great conversation with Mr. Pinar on that. Yeah. Now, I'm going to come from a slightly different perspective. The Book of Revelation is written as allegory, right? So nothing there is very, very clear and clear-cut. So what we are doing is we are interpreting what the Book of Revelation is saying through our lens. There has never been any generation of Christians who didn't think they were living in the last days, right? All of them thought Revelation is going to happen very soon. So they've all been ready for all the generations, and all of them have looked at the signs of the times and decided, yep, this is us. This is us. It's definitely happening. Now, it could be true, but it could also not be true. We could be sitting around for another 1,000 years, or it could be tomorrow. And I think the Bible's very clear. Nobody really knows about what it is. Our interpretations would also then change. Can you imagine if you read the Book of Revelations with the Nazis out in force? Man, that would tick all the boxes. Revelation's here. But now we're just taking that same template and putting it over what's happening today. I think those forces of good and evil are at work at all times. And we spot them as they go. Here is what my dad said to me, which I think is the powerful way to work it, because we can debate about what's going to happen or not, and there are various interpretations. So, and depending on your faith tradition, how you interpret. So many faith traditions don't even believe there's going to be a rapture at all. Many faith traditions actually believe that eventually the world will turn to Christ and then he will return. Others believe that Christ will return and then put the world right. And depending on what they believe, their interpretation will differ as well. But here's what my dad said that I think is really powerful. He says, look, always be ready because Jesus could return tomorrow or today. He says, plan as though you're going to live 1,000 years, but live as though he's coming tonight. And I think that's a wise way to do it. A lot of people waste a lot of energy trying to work out where we are. But what we're called to do is to do good, live righteously, bless other people, honor God. And I think those are the important things to do, because regardless of what happens in the world, if you live this way, you're ready. But you can plan for 1,000 years, right? As though for generations and generations after you, I think it's a wise way to live. I don't want to throw all my energy into people's theories about what's coming next, because I do believe that the forces of evil and good are going to come into a big clash. Good will win, but it's going to be a mess. When that's going to happen, I have no idea. But what I try to do is live my life the right way and to the best of my ability, but also make sure that I plan for the future in case it's not my generation. And that's more or less my take on it. And I know people get really passionate about it, but I think they need to look at it in context. It's a warning, and it's a warning relevant to every single generation. But the better we can do this, just make sure that we get focused on living and the right way, doing good, honoring God, but also planning for the future is the best way to go.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for giving your opinions on the questions I asked.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Give me a handshake, sir. Give me a handshake.
Thank you.
I hope you liked this episode, and this is Lock In with Lachlan.